Hey, this is Rob. Just wanted to let you know that on this show we get into spoilers, and I forgot to tell you. So I just wanted to let you know up front, if you haven't had a chance to see Idiocracy yet, you can just turn it off and come back, because we'll be here waiting for you. Thanks.
He talks like a fag, too.
Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.
At the dawn of the 21st century, the Army began a top-secret experiment.
Meet Joe Bauers, our first subject for the human hibernation experiment. As you know, this is highly classified. However, if successful, we believe humans can be stored indefinitely.
However, the trial run was prone to human error.
See you in a year.
And Joe slept slightly longer than expected. Half a millennium, to be exact. From Mike Judge, creator of Office Space and Beavis and Butthead.
Oh my God!
If you were the smartest person in the world...
This one's in your mouth. This one goes in your butt. Hang on a second. This one goes in your mouth.
And we're stuck with the dumbest people in history.
If you have one bucket that holds 2 gallons and another bucket that holds 5 gallons, how many buckets do you have?
2?
What would you do?
Excuse me, I'm actually supposed to be getting out of prison.
You're in the wrong line.
I'm the smartest guy in the world? Says who?
The IQ test you took in prison. You got the highest score in history.
Even smarter than President Camacho.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of America! In the year 2505.
We got this guy. He's gonna fix everything. So you smart, huh?
The ordinary will be considered extraordinary.
I thought your head would be bigger.
Idiocracy.
For the smartest guy in the world, you're pretty dumb sometimes.
Welcome to the projection booth. I'm your host, Rob St. Mary. Joining me, of course, Mr. Mike White.
I've got electrolytes.
I bet you do. And joining us this week is our good friend, Jeff-Wattrick.
How you doing? Glad to be here.
Thank you, sir. Well, this week we're talking about Idiocracy, the 2006 film from writer-director Mike Judge. Is de-evolution the future? If it is, it might look something like this. The film tells the tale of Joe Bauers, played by Luke Wilson, who is a military employee judged to be the most average man on base. He was only supposed to be frozen for a year, along with a street prostitute played by Maya-Rudolph. But something goes wrong. He wakes up 500 years in the future, only to find out that now being average makes you a genius. Judge's film is a pointed satire and cautionary tale not only about a society that embraces anti-intellectualism, but corporatizing everything it can get its hands on. So, as our guest, Jeff, when was the first time you saw Idiocracy, and what did you think?
I think it was about 2007, 2008, right after it had come onto video, because it lasted, about 30 seconds in the theater. And as with Judge's previous stuff, I was really impressed with the nuance of the theme that he put into this. I mean, from a guy who started with fart jokes on Beavis and Butthead, he's clearly a much more intelligent comic than that. And I think this is just part of that tradition.
What about you, Mr. White?
I remember I was up in Toronto at the time when this came out, because it only came out in like 130-some theaters across North America when it did. I was unable to see it up there, but I really wanted to. It was it's kind of a sad thing with Judge's work, because the same kind of thing happened with Office Space, if memory serves. So I was right there picking it up on video when it finally came out on VHS, or it might have been DVD by this time. And I have to say I didn't really like it the first time I saw it, but it's kind of grown on me over the years.
I remember when it was going to be released, and there was a series of articles that were written about the movie that Fox didn't want you to see. And it led to all of this sort of conspiracy as to, well, they spent all this money on the film. Why are they holding it back? What's so awful about this movie? And there was some some writing on it saying, well, it's Fox, and of course it's Rupert Murdoch, and therefore it's, they're a little more conservative, and what Judge is doing here is sort of showing up certain things, including Fox News in the film, and figured that maybe it was a political statement they felt that the company wasn't too happy with and was trying to bury. Now, well, at least they released it in some form, and I think I agree with you, much like Office Space, it did really find its legs on video, which is eventually where I had the chance to see it. So getting into the plot, I kind of encapsulated it at the top, is Luke Wilson plays Joe Bauers. He's basically a librarian or something on this base, and he's chosen for this experiment to be frozen and just thawed out a year later. But things move rather quickly in the opening part of this film. Actually, before we even meet Bauers, though, there's sort of this, I guess we would say, prologue on how sort of the world gets to where the world eventually gets.
That prologue, to me, is one of the best parts of the movie. I absolutely love this whole idea of how we get to be where we're at, where we have this fairly smart couple, Trevor with an IQ of 138, and I think it's Carol with 141 IQ, and how they are, we're going to wait for children, and we're going to take our time and, do our careers and everything and get prepared first, versus the other family where it's just kids popping up and popping out all over the place.
Having kids is such an important decision.
We're just waiting for the right time. It's not something you want to rush into, obviously.
No way.
Oh, shit, I'm pregnant again!
I got too many damn kids. Thought you was on the pill or some shit.
Hell no!
Must have been thinking of Brittany.
Brittany? No, you... There's no way we could have a child now.
Mm-mm.
Not with the market the way it is, no.
God, no. That just wouldn't make any sense.
It's not subtle commentary whatsoever, but it's very pointed.
Yeah, it also seems to be one of the more controversial parts of the film, at least among critics. I personally think a lot of the criticism of it is valid in terms of eugenics or whatever, but it also sort of misses the point, which is how do you tell the audience within 2 minutes that how society is going to devolve to this point? And this is a very sort of simple, shorthanded way of doing it, that as long as you don't take it literally as this is what's actually going on in the world, it's not an owner's manual, if you will, then the controversy seems unnecessary.
And it's also, I think no one could take it as an owner's manual and a serious take, because it just gets absurd. Just the absurdism piles on, especially as you look at, there's like the chart up in the corner,
right?
The family tree chart, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing and growing, and it just gets more and more ridiculous as it goes.
The part about it I had forgotten until I rewatched it was when he, the redneck guy impales his genitals on a post somehow, and then there's a doctor explaining how
Cleavon is lucky to be alive. He attempted to jump a jet ski from a lake into a swimming pool and impaled his crotch on an iron gate. But thanks to recent advances in stem cell research and the fine work of Drs. Krinsky and Altschuler, Cleavon should regain full reproductive function.
Get your hands off my junk!
I think that was just such a brilliant little moment. Like, even this guy's best efforts to stop procreating, modern science manages to, help him out.
Yes, we're all about prolonging life, and what's the thing they say later on about maintaining hair or stopping hair loss and maintaining erections.
Right.
It also kind of goes to, I think, the cynicism that some people have about science at times, where it seems like, oh, you guys did a study on that, or you're now creating, all right, Viagra, but you can't cure cancer yet. You're like, what's going on over there?
There's a moment, just to jump ahead, where he's in the future hospital, and he's in like this diagnostic booth, and watching it, I was thinking this film's about 3 years too early, or about 5 years too early, because that booth looks like a giant iPhone with the buttons all around it, and that is sort of the hubris of modern technology, is we're making crap that is of no real use, while garbage avalanches pile up in the film, or in real life the planet's overheating.
I mean, I won't come out and say that I'm in favor of sterilization of stupid people, but let's just say that when idiots go out onto Lake St. Clair in April and May and they're trying to ice fish out there, and then it costs them $35,000 to save these idiots as they float away on ice blocks, I kind of think that maybe we should save the money and let Darwinism take over.
Especially when those are usually the same people complaining about like how much education costs them, and their taxes are too high because schools.
Schools. What are those?
Shut up.
He talks like a fag, too.
Go away, Baton.
They get frozen for a year. The garbage avalanches pile up. Well, the garbage piles up in the future. It's 500 years later. We see how everyday things change from things that we know today to what they'll be known 500 years from now, which I especially love with the signs of companies, and especially the Fuddruckers hamburgers.
Yeah, we know from Office Space that Mike Judge is not a fan of these chain restaurants at all. So going from Fuddruckers to Buttfuckers is pretty good.
Well, that's one of the things that amazes me in this film is like how many brand names there are in it and how he can get away with it, because there's Starbucks, there's Costco, there's Carl's Jr., there's Fuddruckers, Mountain Dew, all of this stuff, Pepsi. And I was like, I know that like legal, whenever you put a logo in your film, there's all this legal stuff that you have to clear. And I was watching, and I know you're a huge fan of his stuff, Jeff, Alex Jones's interview with Mike Judge, which you can find on our website, because it's worth it just to watch. And he talks about that in there and said that legal originally said that, okay, well, you have Starbucks in here and we're a little nervous about that, but could you make fun of more people? Because like the legal department felt that if you made fun of a broad range of stuff, it would be harder for them to be sued than if they only picked one target. Well, I know there's a certain amount of parody use that you can do where and I was talking to Mike about this before the show, was in part it was the Flint Falwell case in the 80s before the Supreme Court in the Campari ad, where you can do satire and parody as long as it can never be misconstrued that you're using it in the correct manner. Meaning that, if it was just Starbucks that was in here and they're serving coffee, then that would be, people could get confused. But the fact that it's Starbucks that has hand jobs, people aren't going to be confused by that. They're two different things.
That's interesting. I always assumed that there was some sort of product placement arrangement, because why else would you use Carl's Jr. instead of McDonald's or Costco instead of Walmart? But I don't know. Maybe Carl's Jr. taking away your kid was just funnier.
Please come back when you can afford to make a purchase. Your kids are starving. Carl's Jr. believes no child should go hungry. You are an unfit mother. Your children will be placed in the custody of Carl's Jr. Carl's Jr. Fuck you. I'm eating.
The thing that's funny about Carl's Jr., in some of these maybe placements, I'm not sure, because I haven't read or seen too many interviews with Mike Judge about it. And you'll hear in the interview later with Luke Wilson, he didn't know either. He didn't know how he got away with all of the brands. Is that Carl's Jr., if you remember over the last several years, their ads have been rather risque and kind of playing to the bro crowd. And for them to be in this film almost kind of seems like a direct line out of their marketing, especially when we're talking about, what was it, 5 years or so ago, the whole Paris Hilton on the car eating the big hamburger thing that got all that attention.
Sure. And of course, the other thing is the product that was created from this movie, Brondo, is actually a real thing now.
Yeah, there's a guy who creates products based out of products that are fake that are in movies. So I think he's the same guy who you can now get Brondo from. And he also does Stay Puft marshmallows and even Soylent Green crackers, if you would like those as well. Just all of the sort of over-commercialism in the film. You notice that a lot of the clothing is just like, people wear logoed shirts and stuff like that now, but not to the point, I think, where when we meet Dax-Sheppard's character Frito, he's basically wearing what looks like wallpaper of ads on his clothes.
Yeah, it's kind of a NASCAR chic in the future. We're all race car drivers with 50 million sponsorships brought to you by Carl's Jr.
Why do you keep saying that? Because they pay me every time I do. It's a really good way to make money.
You're so smart. Why don't you know that?
So when the garbage avalanche happens and basically, I guess they look kind of like these coffins where they've been in suspended animation. One crashes into, as I mentioned, Dax-Sheppard's apartment where he appears to be watching TV and sitting in a really big lazy boy Barcalounger kind of thing. And this is where we get like the first view of how, I guess, the more upper echelon people live, because we soon learn that Frito is an attorney. So I guess he would be one of the more smarter people in this, 500 years in the future.
I thought it was kind of interesting to have a guy like Dax-Sheppard who, Punk'd was his first big thing, sitting there watching like this completely inane show about a guy getting punched in the balls.
Next on the Violence Channel, an all-new Ow My Balls.
Which wasn't far off from what Punk'd was. I just thought that was a great little ironic moment. Whether it was intentional or not, I don't know.
Well, and then Ow My Balls is basically what America's Funniest Home Videos is. Just one excuse after another to see somebody taking it in the nuts.
And I've also heard that people said that he was kind of making fun of Jackass, which for me, I actually like Jackass. I'm sorry to say.
I never got into that one. That just seems like just to watch people hurt themselves. Just does not seem fun to me. But
I went to see Jackass the movie as a joke, and I ended up actually really liking it. And so much so that I went to see Jackass 2 when it came out, like first weekend kind of thing. But I never really got into the television show. So I just appreciate some of the more, off-putting pranks, especially like Johnny Knoxville pulling up in his car at a gas station with blood all over the hood and asking to use the hose to clean it off, and just pushing people on those different levels. Though I know there's supposed to be a documentary out about how mean-spirited some of those shows are behind the scenes, and I'm very curious about that.
The other thing is you see later in the film the guy from Ow My Balls, and he in the parlance of the film, quote, talks like a fag. And I thought that was also interesting that here is this guy doing this incredibly inane TV show. He's a big star, but he's maybe one of the 3 or 4 smart people left on the planet. But he's been reduced to getting kicked in the balls to pay his rent.
But isn't that showbiz?
True.
You have these great actors who have studied Shakespeare and are great dramatists who are doing just inane sitcoms.
They're playing Magneto? What?
Exactly. So Frito's watching Ow My Balls, and there's this everything is brightly colored, it's multi-screened, and he as Joe wakes up from the suspended animation, like the coffin opens up or whatever you want to say, and he starts talking to him like, hey, where am I? What's going on? And this is where we get our first hint of the language. And what I was thinking about with the language, which of course in Blade Runner is much more artful, the quote-unquote city speak, this blend of languages. In here, it just seems like it's a blend of real devolved grunts and groans.
But the English language had deteriorated into a hybrid of hillbilly, valley girl, inner city slang, and various grunts. Joe was able to understand them, but when he spoke in an ordinary voice, he sounded pompous and faggy to them.
I have to recommend, if folks watch this with the closed captions on, it really even adds more to it, because you get to see some of the more butchered words, because you can kind of hear that they're not saying these words right, but then to look at them and see how they're being spelled and everything. I mean, especially when he's later on, spoilers, escaping from jail, and the closed captions say literally escape, like EX.
There's a Jack in the Box ad somewhere. It's just a little sight gag, but instead of saying Jack in the Box, it reads Jack in a Box, and it's just on screen for like about half a second. But yeah, it's exactly that. That to me is less interesting in terms of language than some of the more like incorrect, overly formal use you see, particularly from the cops.
Okay, sir. Now we will begin to proceed to obtain your IQ and aptitude tests.
What for?
Okay, sir. This is to figure out what your aptitude's good at and get you a jail job while you're being a particular individual in jail.
That sounds formal and official, but it's actually just terrible, terrible English versus sort of the slang that becomes normal, which is just say what you will about it, but that's just part of the English language and always has been. But I do see this a lot in normal time, in real life, that people try to sort of dress up their language with this overly formal verbiage that's usually wrong or at least clunky. And I guess I give hats off to Mike Judge for getting that part right.
And where that kind of sounds to me, to my ear, is the Coen brothers. And the Coen brothers are particular on doing this, and they've been doing it as far back as Raising Arizona. And it's very heavy in their more screwball comedies where they have people who aren't that bright using big words to make themselves sound more intelligent, but they end up sounding dumber.
What's his name?
Vernon T. Waldrop. Uncle Vernon. Till tomorrow. Then he's gonna be Daddy.
I am the only daddy you got. I am the damn paterfamilias.
But you ain't bona fide.
Well, I went from Idiocracy yesterday right into Lady Killers. So that whole speech pattern of Tom Hanks in there, which is very similar to Clooney's from Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, just saying all these words and meaning absolutely nothing. So yeah, I'm right on board with what you're saying.
So when he ends up at the hospital, he meets I guess another person who could be considered one of the more intelligent individuals in the society. Of course, a doctor, right? So, but you notice everyone's names are all based on brands. So he's Dr. Lexus. You've had Frito, the other character, and just sort of his run-in with the idea of, it seems like everything's been socialized to the point where it's like the worst conspiracy theory come true, where you now have a tattoo and the tattoo pays for everything.
Yeah, it's very Mark of the Beast.
Which I'm sure Alex Jones loves.
Yeah, that I got to say, I was really disappointed when you found that Alex Jones Mike Judge interview. It's sort of like a stake through the heart as someone who's such a big Mike Judge fan, to see him at least mildly sympathetic to Alex Jones' craziness. Because let's be honest, Alex Jones' craziness is what's going to lead to Idiocracy.
Just FYI, we did ask Mr. Judge for an interview, and we were turned down. So just putting that out there. So Alex Jones rates higher than the projection booth on the food chain.
Well, I think it's because they're both in Austin, so I think that might be part of it. From the interview, it sounds like Judge did the interview with him to a certain extent, not really agreeing with a lot of his stuff, but found him to be an entertaining local gadfly who was he talks about at one point how he had this videotape of him from the cable access show that he used to have in Austin and used like his voice or mannerism or something for characters in King of the Hill.
Nice.
Yeah, I can see that. Richard Linklater has that same sort of affinity for Alex Jones, where it's like, I'm not really agreeing with you, but your local color, I guess.
I guess it would be like people liking, trying to think if there was a similar in Detroit when we were kids. You know, I mean, the only one from a political standpoint would have been someone like a Donald Lopsinger, but he wasn't really a media personality. So no. It would be like, I don't know, like someone really being into
Soupy Sales.
Yeah, but if he was like a conspiracy theorist.
Who's to say that Soupy Sales wasn't a conspiracy theorist? What do you think White Fang and Blacktooth are really saying?
It's the race war.
Race war.
Okay, here. Go get him! Go get him! Go get him! Go get him! Go get him!
So I forgot that Justin Long was the doctor in here. He does a really good stupid guy.
Don't want to sound like a dick or nothing, but it says on your chart that you're fucked up. You talk like a fag, and your shit's all retarded. What I do is just like you know, you know what I mean? Like,
no, I'm serious here.
Don't worry, Scro. Now there are plenty of tards out there living really kick-ass lives. My first wife was tarded. She's a pilot now.
I love the Doctor in the Future smoking a giant cigarette of who knows what product, but it was about the size of like a Bob Marley spliff, just sitting there. Yeah, you're fucked up and shit, just smoking away.
Which, him, and then also, God, I can't remember his name, but he plays Michael Bolton in Office Space, who's a member of the cabinet of President Camacho. He seems to be doing the same thing, too, which is never really explained that they're smoking weed, but that's about all I can get from it, is that they're constantly, like, smoking blunts.
I mean, it would have to be, because a tobacco cigarette that size would just, wreck you.
Unless they have determined that tobacco is just absolutely fine now. It seems that everything that was bad for us is okay in this world. The only food seems to be fast food. There is no water. We just have the Brondo. So I don't think they really care about anything being good for your health or not.
I mean, at one point, the whole thing with the Brondo, as it eventually becomes the issue, is that Brondo had bought out basically the FDA and the FCC or something, and then got water basically banned to toilets, and that everything has to be Brondo, like out of where you would get regular water.
Which isn't too far off from, privatization efforts in real life. I mean, it's sort of a comically extreme example, but in terms of the process, it's not that far off.
Well, yeah, I mean, our water's already been put in bottles now. It's unusual in some restaurants to go in and ask for just tap water, which is hilarious and sad at the same time.
And I think the way that storyline where the putting water on the crops, which of course is the right thing to do if you want to make plants grow, destroys the economy. So suddenly putting water on plants, doing the thing that is intrinsically correct, becomes a problem. It is also another great commentary on a lot of things about our economy and the way we sort of value jobs over useful labor. And so we need to keep building F-35 fighter planes that no one in the Pentagon wants, because they create jobs, and we need to bottle water because that creates jobs, and we need to buy 7-blade razors because that creates jobs, even though these are things that no one needs or really wants.
Yeah, and ecology be damned. We want to create jobs. We don't care what it does to the rest of the world.
That's a little bit later on, but getting back to the hospital, he is found not to have a tattoo and therefore can't pay the bill and gets arrested for not paying his hospital bill and is taken before the judge. And I wanted to kind of talk about how also he skewers the legal system in here. And I absolutely love Stephen Root, who'll remember as Milton from Office Space.
Stephen Root is he is a chameleon. I mean, this guy can change his look so much, and it's not like I don't know. It's just little things that he does where he just will look completely different. And this, of course, he's rocking like the Wolverine hairdo and stuff, and the extreme Southern accent. But I mean, like I said, I watched this and then I watched Lady Killers. He's in that, and I'm like, oh my God, is that's? Oh yeah, that's him. It just shows up in a couple scenes, but he always looks so different to me.
He does great things with his voice too. I mean, it's a very subtle change from role to role, but it's changing the voice just a little bit. It's not quite a Rich Little kind of thing, but it does sort of differentiate his characters in a really great way.
Now, I'm fixing to commensurate this trial here. We gonna see if we can come up with a verdict up in here. Now, since y'all say you ain't got no money, we have proprietarily obtained for you one of them court-appointed lawyers. So put your hands together and give it up for Rito Pendejo.
And in the court scene, this is where we learn that Frito is an attorney, and I love that his whole name is Frito Pendejo, which, if you know Spanish, means idiot. Joe's trying to get him to plead his case so he doesn't have to go to prison, and he basically does nothing to help him. He actually ends up agreeing more with the prosecution than being any good of a defense lawyer.
Your Honor, I object that this guy also broke my apartment to shit. Yeah. And you know what else? I object that he's not going to have any money to pay me after he pays back all the money he stole from the hospital.
Don't say I stole. You're my lawyer.
And I object that he interrupted me while I was watching Oh My Balls! That is not okay! I rest my case!
Your Honor, I'm pretty sure we have a mistrial here, sir.
I'm going to mistrial my foot up your ass, you don't shut up.
Just to point out, Stephen Root's full name is Judge Hank the Hangman BMW.
So it just keeps going on like that. We get all of this kind of stuff with the legal, and then like later in the film, like you talked a little bit about the prison scene where he goes to prison, and then Joe kind of realizes, well, if I tell him I'm supposed to get out today, maybe I can get out without actually breaking out of jail.
I like also that there wasn't even a door on the jail. Like they didn't even think of like having a door there. So when he's like, just look behind in the files, I'm sure there's something that says I'm supposed to get out. And then he just runs out a hallway and is free from jail. Like it was that easy to escape from jail, but no one else figured that out.
I love, though, that Rita is quicker because eventually we see that Rita has kind of unfrozen as well, and she's out and she's back to her old tricks, I guess literally in this case, of being a prostitute in the future, but she's not having sex with anybody. She just has this one guy who keeps paying her so he can wait for sex.
Girl. Oh, yeah? So when we gonna do it? Because you've been charging me by the hour and it's been like 3 days.
Oh, yeah, soon, baby, soon. Hey, you know what? Why don't you come back tomorrow?
Yeah, baby, yeah. When I finally utilize you, you gonna be paying me.
That's right. Whatever you say, sir.
She has figured out the system much quicker than Joe. Like, she knows that she can play these people for idiots so much faster than he can. And he's really, we said before, he's the most average person, the average Joe of our time. He's not the brightest bulb that's out there because it does take him that long to figure out, that being well-spoken and trying to explain himself and all this just causes gales of laughter and people to try to attack him for sounding like quote-unquote a fag. And it's just, it really is kind of a frustrating character at times.
I mean, isn't that sort of the theme of the film, though? Is like, and I think this is what people relate to, I guess, in the film, which is people don't walk around thinking that they're necessarily intelligent, and then I think most people just sort of assume, they're about average intelligence, and you come across these, total morons in public places, and you're sort of shocked. How can people get through life being this dumb? And that was basically sort of Joe writ large.
But he's also at times not smart enough to pick up on the fact that she's a prostitute. He still thinks that she's got like a bad relationship with her boyfriend who abuses her, and that she's an artist and really needs to get an agent to handle her paintings.
And you know what? It's none of my business, but when we get back, you and Upgrade should seriously think about couples counseling, okay? And you should also think about maybe finding an art manager who's not also your boyfriend.
Yeah, he's a little dim. A little bit more than dim.
Trusting. Let's say he's trusting.
But the other things with the legal system that I like is when he breaks out, eventually him and Frito are driving around and he's kind of like on the loose, and somehow the tattoo gets picked up, and then they figure out there's a fugitive in the area, and they get out of the car and the cops descend on the car and they just blow it to shit. And as a matter of fact, they get like a rocket launcher or something, and a plane goes down in the background, and there's like people getting excited, and then even Frito gets excited because he's like, yeah, it's like, look at that, and it's like, but that's your car, man. Like, they're blowing up your car.
Blow up that shit. Doesn't matter who gets affected as long as there's big explosions.
There's definitely a very short attention span in this vision of the future. Like every 30 seconds, especially you see that with Frito, like his mind is like a squirrel looking at shiny nickels, just like goes from one thing to the next and cannot remember. There's no continuity of thought.
The reason why they're out to get him is they find out that the IQ test that he took in prison shows that he's the smartest man in the world. He got the highest IQ and on this test. So the president's been trying to track him down. So eventually they track him down. They take him to the White House, and he's brought before our president. And this is a sci-fi film pre-Obama, because the president is black.
President being played by one of my absolute favorite actors, Terry Crews, being billed here as Terry Allen Crews. I have loved this guy since the first time I've seen him, and even when he's in a shitty movie like White Chicks or The Expendables, he is fantastic. So I'm always riveted when he's on screen.
I realized this when I watched it again for the first time in maybe a couple of years, that there seems to be this sci-fi trope that that you're watching a sci-fi movie when the president's black. Have you ever noticed this?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, Morgan Freeman has played the president several times.
Always in the future.
Yeah.
There's usually a giant asteroid on its way.
So I guess maybe the next thing for people writing sci-fi is, I don't know, a Latino president. I don't know. I mean, we can't do the black president anymore. That's already been done.
Well, it is kind of life then imitating art in that, there's always a black president when everything is about to go to shit, and we finally elect an African-American president right as our economy collapses. So good work, Hollywood. You picked it. You nailed it.
Right when the automotive companies are about to close up, right when the swine flu is hitting the United States. Yeah, just a few things.
Nice. Yeah, I totally forgot that. It's always when things are going the worst that the black president's in charge.
Maybe the next one will be, and I know this is crazy talk, but maybe they'll do a woman president in sci-fi movies.
Forget it. Ain't gonna happen.
I know.
That's just
too nuts.
It's just too crazy. No one will believe it.
Because she's going to get her period, and the next thing you know, we're bombing Russia.
Oh, man. But his cabinet's great because he has like a kid in there who's Secretary of Defense. He's got like the guy who's the Secretary of Education, who seems to be enthralled with like a Rubik's Cube or something, and is kind of like, real mouth breather, who happens to be the president's brother-in-law, but he does a good job, so it's okay.
And which is the one who's like looking down the barrel of a gun?
I think that was him. I think that was the Secretary of Education. Yeah.
I couldn't quite pick out what he was looking at. I didn't write that down.
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, he's just staring down the barrel of a gun, son of a gun.
Joe becomes Secretary of the Interior because that's, supposed to be the job for making sure the plants grow. And he's trying to figure out why the plants grow. And he's going to make everything all right. And I love sort of the State of the Union address that President Camacho gives to Congress, which looks like it's Congress and wrestling and like football, kind of like all put in a blender with the big jumbotron and all that other stuff.
I know shit's bad right now with all that starving bullshit and the dust storms and we running out of French fries and burrito coverings.
Yeah.
But I got a solution.
That's what you said last time, dipshit. I got a solution. You're a dick. South Carolina, what's up?
Well, President Dwayne Elizondo Mountain Dew Herbert Camacho was a former wrestler and I believe porn star as well.
Yeah, I think it was Ultimate Fighter and porn star was his, given his previous occupations. Another sort of life then imitating art is, okay, we've got the African-American president, the country's in trouble, he's giving the State of the Union, and what happens? Someone from South Carolina starts heckling him during the State of the Union, which in 2009 actually happened.
There are also those who claim that our reform efforts would ensure illegal immigrants. This, too, is false. The reforms I'm proposing would not apply to those who are here illegally. It's not true.
I totally forgot about that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I guess we are starting to live in a Idiocracy world.
And we'll talk more about that after our interview about how Idiocracy has, instead of moved forward in 5 years, 500 years, has moved forward more in like 5 years since the movie came out.
Well, yeah, I don't remember, speaking of President Camacho being a former porn star, I don't remember what year it was when we started to go from the shame of people being involved in a sex tape like a Rob Lowe to that being how you got cachet in entertainment, like a Kim Kardashian or an R. Kelly or something. I mean, now it seems like you need to put out a sex tape if you're going to be taken seriously as one of these kind of quasi-celebs.
So next week, look for the Mike White sex tape coming your way.
You won't really know that it's me since I'm wearing a leather mask with a zipper.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. So, but the whole thing in front of Congress is just, it just kind of blew my mind when I saw that, because he comes out to like this song and there's an explosion and like smoke and everything. And I was just like, maybe that's one of the ways that we can actually get people interested in politics. I was thinking of sort of the evolution of this as being, people like real flashy entrances. So maybe we need that to get them excited about following politics, and then it just sort of devolved from there.
Yeah, everything became spectacle. Like every public event in this movie was spectacle. It was bread and circus.
So then he Joe starts about trying to figure out how to get the plants to grow, and this is where he's out there and he gets sprayed from the irrigation with the Brondo, and he's just sort of like, why are they putting this on the crops? We should put the water on the crops, but why would you put water on the crops? Because
the Brondo's got what plants crave. It's got electrolytes.
So wait a minute. What you're saying is that you want us to put water on the crops?
Yes.
Water? Like out the toilet?
Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be out of the toilet, but yeah, that's the idea.
But Brondo's got what plants crave.
It's got electrolytes.
Okay, look.
That whole circular logic that they have is just amazing. And the whole thing that they only associate water with what's in toilets.
It is one of the more interesting sort of, if you don't think about this too much, kind of moments. It's like, do they not have rivers and lakes in the future? Like, water is only in toilets? But yeah, the circular logic, especially with, I think it was the kid in the cabinet, kept like doing this thing with his hands where he was like shuffling them over and over again, as if to say the logic is circular, therefore it's correct.
Well, that's a good point about the rivers and streams and stuff, because whenever they show, there are just a few shots of like the landscape of the world, and oh my God, those are just the most terrifying kind of shots where, you get the buildings that are like roped together and buildings that have fallen from one to the other. I don't know if it's like the Golden Gate in the background, but there's this huge spire at one point. I'm like, well, maybe the whole bay's just been filled in with garbage because it is just every place. And the best one for me, though, is the roads that are just going around to nothing, a bridge to nowhere, literally, and the cars that just keep going off and just forming this huge pile of cars at the bottom of this.
They just stop with they're like, it's enough overpass for today. We'll just leave it here. Yeah. I forgot about it.
Milwaukee Bridge, yeah.
So eventually he tries to use the water. It doesn't work, and the president told the people in his address that if it doesn't work, then, we're going to put him in prison. He's going to go back to prison, and that'll be the end of it. So he ends up going back to prison when he tells them to use water, and the economy crashes because everyone works for Brondo, it appears. And I love the joke on Fox News in here that they have.
He tried taking water from toilets, but its secretary not sure who finds himself in the toilet now. And as history pulls down its pants and prepares to lower its ass on Not Shore's head, it will be Daddy Justice who will be crapping on him this time.
And the names of the people that are on Fox News, the one guy who's just shirtless. And the female reporter who keeps looking to the right when the report is coming up on the left and everything. It's so many jokes upon jokes upon jokes in this film that it takes a lot to pull it apart. And I kind of hate watching this on a small screen because I know I'm missing probably, 30% of the jokes just because I wasn't able to see this on the big screen because there's so much stuff going on in the background of all of these shots.
I also like that the TV newscasters, despite being basically naked and as dumb as anyone else in the future, if not dumber, have perfect broadcast diction. Like tonight on the news, they do that. That's the skill that remains. The actual critical thinking, reporting. No, but they can speak in an authoritative voice.
It's all about the presentation,
right?
Which then leads us to he gets 1 day of rehabilitation, which Joe goes, hey, that doesn't sound too bad, 1 day rehabilitation. And they're like, no, rehabilitation is their basically Monday Night Football, and it is it's basically back to the gladiator school to a certain extent, 500 years in the future, which reminds me of this joke that George Carlin had years ago about the Monday night executions and the idea that America wants two things and wants a balanced budget and it wants capital punishment. So why don't we put the two together?
I also love that they make a special like killing machine for Joe, and they're going to bring it out, but it was too large to actually get into the arena. Like someone had the engineering skill in this future to build this giant, like I don't even know how to describe this giant tank-like machine, I guess. But they never thought to measure the doorway.
And the two that do make it in, the Dildozer, and I can't remember the name of the other one, but those are just insane.
And he's driving like what looks like a Yugo or something. Like they give him his own car to battle against them with this big giant like rubber dildo as the I guess like the hood ornament or something.
Okay, let's meet our rehabilitation officers for tonight. With a combined record of 62 kills, please welcome Billy Mwamba and the Dildozer!
I got a truck too, right?
Yeah. Here it comes.
Which comes off, and then there are fans fighting over like who gets to take home the dildo from the front of his car in the crowd. You know, like it was a football.
Right. The thing that's funny is he's supposed to meet, and this is the guy who is in the big tank thing that gets destroyed because it can't get into the arena. His name is Beef Supreme, and that actually is Luke Wilson's brother, Andrew Wilson, who plays Beef Supreme in the scene.
That was he was in Bottle Rocket, right? He was Future Man, right?
Yeah, which has all three of the Wilson brothers, and you'll hear Luke talk about working with his brothers in the interview coming up.
I really liked Beef Supreme, especially that he's this kind of silent and happy guy, and just very, of course, playing to the audience the entire time.
Yeah, there's that scene where he's sort of fake chasing him around the arena, like I don't know where he is, and doing the call and response. Right. It felt like an episode of Card Sharks.
Yeah, it's funny that I don't know if I guess we have gone from Gladiators, the TV show, American Gladiators, and then I want to say Terry Crews was in a TV show that was kind of the same, and now we've gone to like American Ninja or Ninja Warrior or whatever, which is a lot less violent, but then we've also kind of embraced Ultimate Fighting Championship at the same time, where it's just, the violence of wrestling taken past that to real life, just mayhem. I can see this car battle definitely becoming something of the future too. But I love too that we go all the way back to the Malachi Crunch at one point during this car battle. So they do name check the Malachi brothers from Happy Days as they're talking about this.
And then also I love that they have a band there, if it was a sporting event, it would be like a marching band, but it's not. It's like a bunch of guys playing guitar.
And only guitar.
They're all playing the same riff.
Right.
What was that 80s video? The guy who was in the suit, and the girls were all behind him sort of playing guitar at the same time. That was what...
Oh, it was one of those Robert Palmer videos.
Right, yeah,
Addicted to Love.
Yes, that's what it kind of looked like. And I don't know why, if there's any purpose for that, or if that was just accidental, but it looked directly like it came from Addicted to Love.
What's that whole thing of why have one when you can have 20 or 30 or 40? It's so, this future that is here is just so much about excess.
In his battle during rehabilitation, it finally comes that Frito goes out with one of the cameramen, and because Rita realizes that actually the water is working, and after they end up at the Starbucks because they're morons and can't figure out exactly why they left rehabilitation with the camera in the first place, they get into a fight. The camera falls, and it shows the crops are growing. So Joe ends up getting his pardon after all.
You like money too?
Oh, I like money.
Yeah.
How many billions?
We haven't commented yet on the fact that Starbucks in the future does not serve coffee, but serves hand jobs with extra foam. It's just like this coffee, it's not profitable enough. We need something that people really want, that they'll really pay for.
Man, I could really go for a Starbucks,
Yeah, well, I really don't think we have time for a hand job, Joe.
Well, and then that Costco from earlier that just goes on forever. And again, talk about the excess. I mean, why have one couch there when you can have a field of couches, all exactly the same, but they have this field of couches that they're walking past, and just it goes on for miles and miles, so much so that Frito actually attended law school there.
Yeah, and there's like a plane crashed inside the building, and there's birds, and you get the feeling that maybe it's like its own state or something because it's so damn big.
Yeah.
It's great. I don't know, do you want to go into spoiler here, or do you want to hold off on that?
Well, I mean, the movie's 6 from 14, 8 years old, so I don't know. We can or not. I don't know.
But after he gets pardoned, and the crops are growing again, and of course everyone's happy, Joe eventually becomes vice president to President Camacho, and then becomes president himself, marries Rita, and he gives this great speech before the House of Representing, as they call it in here, how things need to go back to the way they were, because, back in the day, there were some good things.
Today I step into the shoes of a great man, a man by the name of Dwayne Elizondo Mountain Dew Herbert Camacho.
Under President Not Sure's leadership, a new era dawned.
There was a time in this country when smart people were considered cool. Well, maybe not cool, but smart people did things like build ships and pyramids, and they even went to the moon.
The line from that I always remember was,
people wrote books and movies that had stories, so you cared whose ass it was and why it was farting, and I believe that time can come again.
Which receives a standing ovation from the House of Representatives. Like, that was the most profound thought they had ever heard.
And I love Luke Wilson here because it seems like he's doing a mix of John Kennedy and Bill Clinton.
Yes, and I love that their salute is the middle finger now and just flipping everybody off. We've devolved that much.
Very nice. And how it ends is Joe and Rita get married, and they have 3 kids, and Frito gets married to multiple wives and has like 30 kids. And the voiceover is,
Joe and Rita had 3 children, the 3 smartest kids in the world. Vice President Frito took 8 wives and had a total of 32 kids. 32 of the dumbest kids ever to walk the earth. Okay, so maybe Joe didn't save mankind, but he got the ball rolling, and that's pretty good for an average guy.
So I like the idea that even though he got the crops to grow, even though all this stuff, we may still kind of be fucked.
Yeah, it's not necessarily the happiest ending in the world.
No, but it's still a little hopeful. There's a little hope in there.
Yeah. Did you stick around till the end of the credits?
I'm not sure.
I don't think I have. Is there a little Easter egg there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Upgrade has had himself frozen. So the pod opens up and he gets out and starts looking for his bitch and just starts going down the street in his pimp clothes while like the hip hop music starts coming up and everything. And that's the end of the movie.
Nice.
That's sequel.
Yeah, there you go. Something tells me that's not going to happen, so, especially since like Extract got even fewer theaters as far as I know. I don't even remember when Extract opened up.
Yeah, this movie kind of escaped. I know that there was a contractual minimum that they had to do, and that it had to be in a certain amount of theaters for so long and things like that. And it really is kind of sad, going back to that Alex Jones interview with Mike Judge. He talks about in there where they did test screenings where they gave cards to the audience and said, okay, we'll fill these out. And he was saying that there's like 5 different gradings that you can give a film when you're in a test audience. But so it's like excellent, very good, poor, and like terrible or whatever. And he said that the studio only counts the first 2. Like they count excellent and very good. They don't count good. And he said that when they counted good, they had like 70-80% audience liked it. He goes, but when they only counted the first 2, he goes, it was really low because it is so weird and there is certain elements that are odd. He goes, if someone shows you something like this, kind of like what you were saying, Mike, when you first saw it, you're like, yeah, it's good, but it's like when you saw it again and you got more of the jokes. And every time I see it, I always see something new. Because like you were saying, there's so many different things in here. It's hard to really get it all in the first time that you watch it because it moves so fast.
Yeah, the first time I saw this, it felt like a skit that went on for too long. Like there's that opening up where we talked about that kind of prologue, and I thought that almost stood on its own. And then the rest of the movie with Luke Wilson, who, like I said, his character is fairly dim, so it was a little tough to kind of get behind him. But now I've kind of accepted who he is and everything, so I'm okay with the film. But as far as the first time, I was just like, man, this is like one joke that just goes on for way too long. I really could have done with this to be like a half an hour movie rather than an hour and a half. But now I do kind of appreciate it a lot more, and it's nice to see some of these faces pop up, like Justin Long, or like, I didn't know who Maya-Rudolph was at the time, so seeing her in here, it means a little bit more now. But yeah, when I first saw it, I was like, yeah, okay. But I have to say, I might have felt kind of the same way about Office Space, where now Office Space, to me, is absolutely a classic.
Well, I think they're both movies that really would have benefited from trailers and sort of, prepping an audience for here's what this movie is really about. And it's just weird, like you say, the extract also the same treatment. It's like everything Mike Judge has done has been extremely successful, both critically and commercially, and yet everyone keeps giving him chances to do things that they don't support. It's like, then the tracker shows once this gets before the right audience, it's going to make you a lot of money, but that no one in Hollywood wants to put him, do the work to get him there, sort of through the traditional marketing means. It's all this, sort of cult favorite DVD or VHS passed around till it reaches critical mass kind of success. And it's like one guy in Hollywood finally figures out how to market Mike Judge. He becomes the next Brandon Tartikoff or Michael Eisner. It really is also, I think, kind of a hard sell for some people on those films, just out of the box, because he's dealing with stuff that isn't traditional laugh riot stuff. I mean, I think you could watch Idiocracy on 2 levels. You could watch it just as pure entertainment, and then you can watch it as a satire. It's kind of like how The Simpsons works. It's how all of Mike Judge's stuff really works. And I think that, like we've talked about on the show before, Mike, a lot of these studio types are like, that's too hard to try and market. That's too hard to try and get people to understand what that is. I need something that's just one thing, and that's it. Like, stop putting these multiple levels on top of things, because then I get confused when I'm trying to sell this film.
Well, yeah, the whole thing with Fox just kind of shit-canning this, it totally reminds me of Freaked, where it was this fantastic movie, hilarious. They have a regime change at Fox, and then they just bury it. And this time it seemed to be not necessarily the regime change, but the whole idea of, this movie, it's a little too smart for us. We're just going to, put it on the back burner kind of thing, and just too biting. It's just too many. It's almost too smart for the audience.
Yeah. So how about we go to the break and play an interview with the star of Idiocracy, Luke Wilson, and we'll come back and we'll talk about some of this stuff and how Idiocracy, since its escape, and specifically since it got onto home video, has been a place of some debate and also a lot of fans.
One dark and stormy night in the mid-'80s, Joe Bob Briggs, Harlan Ellison, and the ghost of El Santo pulled a train on Elvira while Siskel and Ebert sobbingly masturbated in the corner. From that union arose the greatest movie critic and luchador that ever lived. But we're not going to talk about him. He's kind of a dick. Instead, we're going to talk about me, El Goro, the stuttering movie fan and host of the Talk Without Rhythm podcast. Every week on Talk Without Rhythm, I discuss 2 to 3 movies tangentially tied together by a theme. I cover action.
I'm the most complete fighter in the world.
Sci-fi.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
horror.
Oh, no tears, please. It's a waste of good suffering.
And the continuing adventures of James Spader, sexual deviant.
You're not worried that I'm going to fuck you, are you? I'm not interested in that, not in the least. Now pull up your skirt.
So check me out at tworpodcast.blogspot.com, drunkenzombie.com, or subscribe on iTunes. Talk Without Rhythm, the only podcast that will not attract the world. Adios.
Christopher Media, the Weedsman Podcast.
Cures rickets, polio, conjunctivitis,
AIDS. Let's just go hog wild.
You get in a car accident, you just use a little bit and you'll be fine.
Yeah, rub it on your car and yourself. It'll fix your car and your bones.
Try this special trick to get out of traffic tickets with Rick Simpson oil.
Rub it on the cop. He'll just go away.
The Weedsman Podcast. Every Friday on iTunes and ChristopherMedia.net. Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.
Hi, this is Andrew from We Hate Movies, and you're listening to The Projection Booth. If you feel like laughing after listening to some serious film discussion, head on over to our show, WHMPodcast.com. Every Tuesday, a new episode drops, us ragging on bad movies, whereas the good folks here at The Projection Booth are talking about good, party, cinema-related stuff. Go here for the cinema, come to us for the laughs afterwards. We Hate Movies every Tuesday.
Let me ask you a question. Are you getting enough? I bet you'd love more, right? Well, AdamandEve.com wants to give you more with 10 free gifts. First, you'll get a sexy surprise for her. Second, a specially selected toy for him. And third, a little something we know you'll both enjoy. Plus, you'll get 6 full-length adult movies on DVD. And number 10, free shipping on your entire order. So what do you have to do to get your 10 free gifts? It's not hard. Just go to AdamandEve.com and select any one item. It could be an adventurous new toy, sexy piece of lingerie, or anything you desire. Just enter offer code BOOTH at checkout, and you'll get all 10 free gifts. Go check out AdamandEve.com today. Select one item and get 10 free gifts, including free shipping when you enter offer code BOOTH. That's BOOTH at AdamandEve.com.
All right, I'm here with Bill Byforce and Mr. Chris to tell you a little bit about Outside the Cinema.
All right, Reverend Scott, take us to church.
What can we expect to find from a typical show?
2 hours of just random blabber.
Is there anyone's coattails you rode in on to popularity?
I'm the guy that fucking burns the coattails and then pisses on them.
You review all these exploitation, horror, comedy, cult, and often all-around terrible movies. You must have a strong driving force that keeps you going.
Ego.
I don't know if I've heard you say that before.
Yeah, I've been saying that for a while.
Really?
I have been saying that for a while. Also, I'm high on smack.
Well, it's definitely working for you guys. People are coming out in droves to support you on iTunes.
We just the other day got a 1-star review on iTunes.
Well, that is one star too many. Let me tell you, the worst fucking piece of shit I've ever heard.
This has been great, guys.
Thanks, Scott. That was good. Oh, he's got you crying over there.
I'm good for the rest of the year.
Nice.
That was too much.
Going back to the early days for you, you kind of come from a media family in a way.
Yeah. My dad had run the public television station in Dallas from, I think, maybe 68 to 1977. And then he started a little advertising agency in Dallas. And then my mom was a photographer who worked with Richard Avedon on his book In the American West. She kind of organized all the logistics, what rodeos, what state fairs, what motels they'd stay in. And then she also is a photographer herself who's had, I think, 4 or 5 books published, including one about Avedon working on In the American West. So, yeah, kind of grew up in the arts a little bit.
Is that where you and your brothers got your interest in acting? Do you think it was from that?
I mean, my dad was a big movie fan, and, he would want to go to a movie, and he'd just kind of take us along or whoever was around. And then we also just kind of naturally, for some reason, gravitated towards movies. I mean, our friends were, really into movies and would kind of see everything, from, just the stuff at the multiplex to, I'm always surprised thinking back how we did kind of track stuff down that was only showing at, the one theater that was kind of more art house type stuff. And then also there was one theater in town that would show, double features of older movies, and there was one of our friends' parents would take us to those. I think it was $1 per movie, so we'd go to those. And it was just without ever kind of talking about it, it just was kind of our primary interest.
And eventually, when you got into actually doing film and things like that, and I'm thinking of both the short and feature of Bottle Rocket. I mean, you worked with your brothers, so I was going to ask, what are sort of the best and worst things that you find working with your brothers?
I think you could probably narrow it down to the best and worst is the shorthand. It's great to have a shorthand, and then sometimes having that shorthand, which can just be a glare, where there's so much history behind one look from one of your brothers. But no, I mean, for the most part, and I think that's why we've done it, here and there over the years, and, I think we would have done it more, had we had the chance. And we, I've made the effort to do it and, tried to get things set up with Andrew and Owen, and we're trying to do one right now. In a way, just kind of you cut out the middleman a little bit. And, yeah, we, growing up together and being close, it's just kind of one less person you have to get to know or, worry about working with.
Do you remember when you met Wes-Anderson?
I think I met Wes probably for the first time, when we're living in an apartment down in Austin, when, would have been 89, 90, or actually, yeah, maybe like 90, 91. And I just went down to visit Owen, maybe my senior year of high school, and those guys would have been a couple years in. And yeah, I think Wes had written a play, and Owen was acting in it, and I went and saw the play and met Wes, and yeah, I think that's kind of would have been the first time.
What was sort of your impression of him then, and then, working with him over the films that you did?
Well, I mean, thinking back, he had just the way his room, was organized, and, I remember, like, photographs he had up on his wall, and just, kind of through my mom, and she had a really big photography collection, her book collection, so they were kind of, Cartier-Bresson type pictures, and then also some film pictures, that he'd either photocopied or cut out of books, and then, just things like that where I was familiar with stuff like that, but I also thought, well, gosh, we don't have any other friends that have pictures like this up. And, just things like how meticulous kind of his handwriting was, things like that kind of make an impression on you. But, yeah, he definitely seemed different. And we had kind of a wide range of friends, We had, people we played sports with and people we'd grown up with and, guys that, we'd go down the creek with and, like, blow up firecrackers and stuff like that. And then there was Wes, who was, kind of much more kind of thoughtful and creative and not into that kind of stuff. But at the same time kind of fit in. He'd grown up in Houston and gone to one of these schools that the school we went to in Dallas, we competed against them. So, yeah, nothing was that out of the ordinary.
Do you remember how Bottle Rocket came to be, first the short and then into the feature?
Yeah, those guys had written a full-length script, and I think maybe the brothers McMullen had been done at that point, and we had been thinking to try and do something like that, and then, quickly found out that even to do something like that was much more money than we had, $200,000 or $250,000, and then through my dad, we met this guy, Kit Carson, who had, kind of been an experimental filmmaker and was around Dallas and had co-written Paris, Texas. And my dad put Owen and Wes together with Kit Carson, who said, why don't you make a short film? He had ties to Sundance and, said, take this script and from the script kind of make a self-contained little film. And that's just what those guys did. And then, it was just kind of natural progression to put me in it. And I mean, it's not as if I'd been pushing to be an actor, but I was just kind of around.
I was going to ask about that because you basically are the lead, it's kind of co-leads. There's kind of a group there. But I mean, for you, Anthony, how did he evolve between the short and the feature for you?
Well, I mean, it was already written, the feature script, and then, they did, Owen and Wes did go out to L.A. to work with James L. Brooks one summer on a rewrite, and I went with them, and they kind of, I don't remember it changing that much, but, there were, changes made, I think, maybe with the relationship between Anthony and Inez and things like that. So, yeah, I don't know that it changed that much. He was always kind of the same guy, kind of the foil for Dignan, where Dignan was kind of the loose cannon and Anthony was kind of the more, kind of quiet, introspective one, and Dignan was more kind of, I don't even know how I'd describe Dignan.
Do you think that's sort of your personalities between you and your brother?
Not really. I mean, Owen's really nothing like Dignan. That was why it was so funny to see him play that character. We definitely knew characters in Texas that, we got a kick out of, like friends and then just people from around town that kind of dressed differently and talked differently. And, you kind of wondered what they did for work and things like that. And, I mean, Owen wasn't really anything like Dignan, and maybe in terms of Anthony, it's not like it was, some Gary Oldman transformation for me to play that part. It was, seemed kind of, it seemed kind of an easy part to play, so maybe that does mean it was kind of, I could identify with it.
After it came out, that really helped to establish the three of you, in a lot of ways to get your career rolling. And I was wondering, what that was like for you, because it seems like you really didn't go out to pursue to be an actor really in that way. It almost feels like you kind of fell into it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was really, like I was saying, really into movies. That's what I read about, read about actors, read about directors, and, was interested in acting, but I don't know that I ever would have, moved to New York or moved to L.A. had it not been for Owen or Wes. I think it probably would have just been one of those thoughts or ideas that just kind of faded away. But yeah, just through those guys, started doing it. So in a way, I did kind of feel ready to do it. Had a, knew about movies and a little, as much as you could know about how movies are made from having read about it, but, didn't study, didn't go to film school. So, yeah, I did kind of fall into it in a way, yeah. I'm glad I kind of came into it the way that I did. I also respect people that study acting and things like that. I just don't know that it would have worked for me. It might have kind of scared me off from it.
Was there ever a time that you were thinking of doing something else?
Not really. I was pretty young. I was, in, 21, 22, and all I'd really done up to that point that I enjoyed was landscaping. Not complicated landscaping. It just, kind of working on landscaping crews. That's kind of what I did and what I liked to do.
You had a part in the next film in Rushmore, but then you played Richie in Royal Tenenbaums, and I was wondering, was that written with you in mind, or did you think...
I don't know if they did write that with me in mind. I mean, I think they kind of probably did, or probably Wes and Owen knew early on that I would play that, and Owen would play Eli Cash. But yeah, I can't say for sure. I mean, I think probably they kind of would have written it with me in mind.
I mean, that was also a considerably bigger film, bigger cast. And,
yeah.
And what do you mean, sort of, how did you sort of see this evolve with both your brother and Wes in terms of those early days with Bottle Rocket and then doing Royal Tenenbaums? I mean, how was it?
Yeah, I mean, each movie kind of seemed to be a step up, just in every respect. Just in terms of those first three that I was involved with, I'm sure the budget went up, the number of name actors went up, and I mean, first movie was shot in Dallas. That seemed totally natural. Second, Rushmore was shot in Houston, so we were on location more. I mean, even though it was Wes's hometown, and then the Tenenbaums, we were in Manhattan, with a much bigger cast, and of course, Hackman and Gwyneth Paltrow and Ben Stiller and Danny Glover and Angelica Houston. So all of a sudden, it was like being kind of majorly in the deep end of the pool. While at the same time, I mean, and it all kind of comes from Wes. He never seemed overwhelmed or under the gun. He just always seemed totally, one of those people that was doing what he was meant to be doing, And yeah, it's just like, the person in charge. I mean, it's one of those cliches where the whole vibe on a set or in a company or in a business kind of comes from the top. And yeah, Wes was, just always kind of in control.
I mean, and you being a big movie fan, you and your brother and Wes and everything, I mean, to be on that set and to have those interactions with people, like I'm sure you've seen, hundreds of Gene Hackman films by the time you made Royal Tenenbaums. I mean, what was it like being able to interact with people?
Pretty incredible. And then, one thing I also learned from Hackman is, from loving his movies, the big ones, and then even, smaller ones like The Package, stuff like that I could remember seeing in the theater. And so what I'd think, gosh, this is unbelievable, Gene Hackman. And then as soon as I started to work with him, didn't think about that stuff. And so it made me kind of think about how he kind of carried himself, how he was on the set, how prepared he was. And, so to work with somebody so iconic and then have it all kind of go out the window and suddenly be thinking of him as a character was really interesting and, helpful to me to think, okay, well, this guy's certainly not talking about his legacy or acting like he has one. He's just doing this part. I mean, just the first time with James Caan was pretty incredible. And then, again, being James Caan, I could remember seeing Thief with my dad, when I would have been 10 or 11, just being with him on a Saturday and him wanting to go see it and being really blown away by it. And then, Bill Murray, of course, Stripes was one of those movies that had a friend with a Betamax, and that was one of the first ones out, so we'd probably watch that 100 times, so... immediately we were around these people that we were huge fans of, and then, got along with them and felt comfortable with them. And so that was just kind of interesting. That kind of set the tone.
Yeah. Like I said, it's always great to meet people whose work you admire, and, kind of takes you a minute or two to realize, hey, they're just like you doing the work.
Yeah, exactly.
You kind of mentioned it a little bit, but growing up in Texas, did you find that a lot of the characters that worked their way into these films that your brother wrote with Wes were based on people that you knew or interacted with?
Yeah, I mean, especially kind of early on for, Bottle Rocket and Rushmore, just these people kind of around Dallas, kind of on the fringes, because, we were kind of on the fringes too after college and just kind of trying to figure out what to do and all living together and, working landscaping and then those guys working different jobs and, becoming friends with Bob Musgrave and, and Kumar, who, we'd go to this little health food restaurant that Kumar's son ran and that Kumar taught yoga upstairs. So, yeah, these guys were just kind of a part of our lives, so it seemed like kind of a natural progression to have them in the movie. And then I'm sure kind of on a psychological level, maybe it kind of made us feel more comfortable and we, it wasn't such a, we never kind of stepped back to think, well, gosh, this is, this is a $5 million undertaking. We're kind of to look over and see, Kumar or different people that we knew, kind of made it seem like it wasn't that out of the ordinary.
Going to ask you about working with another Texan, and that's Mike Judge. And, Idiocracy, how did that come to you?
Well, I had known and been friends with Judge for a while, and can't even really remember how I met him. Just knew that he was an Austin guy, and then, just got to be friends, and it was more just kind of going out and having beers. He'd be here, or I'd be in Austin. We were just hanging around together a lot. And then he had Idiocracy, and so we just talked about it, and it just seemed, really funny. And I'd auditioned for Office Space before I knew Mike, and I'd auditioned as a voice on King of the Hill before I knew Mike. So I knew about his, the stuff he was doing, before I knew him as a person. And then I can't even remember how we met. It was one of those things, just kind of getting along with the people and having similar sense of humor. And Mike grew up in Albuquerque and then spent a lot of time in Dallas, so it just kind of felt simpatico.
Do you remember what you thought of it when you first read it?
I mean, I thought it was one of those things that was making me think, gosh, am I now, it seemed like this is pretty out there, where it was kind of making me think, how it's like, I always feel like there's kind of generational humor, like there were people that would have thought, something about Mary was crude or something like that, or people that would have thought Airplane was crude, or people that would have thought, Clockwork Orange was too much. And, there were times on Idiocracy, where I'd think, geez, is this too much? And then Mike is so kind of has such a poker face that, I'd say, is this too much, Mike? And he'd be like, it seems funny to me. So we just do it. And of course, Mike was right. And yeah, it was, fun to do. And also, I always respect somebody like Mike, because I feel like you can kind of get that sense of humor that you have when you're younger, beaten out of you, or, you get told to grow up, or told, asked why you're laughing at that. Like, I can remember I did these commercials with Errol Morris, and he was, it reminded me of Mike, the way he acted. And Errol Morris had said to me, like his mom had said to him, well, if you think that's funny, then you're sick. and I think, yeah, it takes a certain kind of, like, stubbornness and strength to kind of hold on to the dreams of the youth, even if they are kind of immature.
It sounds like you definitely got along on the set and was just wondering how he was as a director.
Oh, he's great, just real funny, real open to ideas. And, I just remember doing this, where my character had been made president, and in the rehearsals, just when we were setting up the shots, I was just kind of kidding around trying to do a JFK voice. And then when it came time to shoot it, I just did it in a normal voice, and Mike said, aren't you going to, do the JFK voice? And I was like, gosh, I mean, you want me to do that? I was like, I will do it. I was just kind of doing it for fun. And then, yeah, that was one of those things where, yeah, Mike had me do it. And he also puts together kind of a good group of people. He had this rapper from Houston there, and then, you know, we had another rapper there, and then Terry Crews before I knew who he was, and then a guy from Fort Worth who he'd been in a band with that just made these kind of ridiculous faces. And so I feel like it's kind of the same kind of way of working as, you know, kind of Wes and Owen and stuff like that.
Well, actually, when you're giving that speech as the president, I saw a little Bill Clinton in there.
Yeah, maybe Clinton, too.
Yeah.
Who's always fun to do.
I was wondering, was there much improv in there, or did he pretty much have it scripted out?
For that speech or the movie?
Just the whole film.
Yeah, there was improv there, but it was also pretty scripted. But yeah, Mike was kind of definitely open to stuff, and you know, I can't remember. Just because we're talking about the speech, you know, I made up that name, and Mike left it in there, like Hector, Herbert, Mountain Dew, Elizondo, Camacho, or whatever it was. Yeah, where Mike would just kind of leave stuff in that he thought was funny. But it was also just a really funny script, and that's where you kind of rely on a good director. I've just found over the years sometimes when something's funny, it can make, you know, it's just like kidding around with a friend and riffing with somebody where something's funny and you think, oh, what if we did this? And it you know, it might just be more of the same and not as funny or not more funny. And that's when, you know, it's good to have somebody kind of sift through the ideas, but also being open to them. And that's how Mike is.
It's funny that you said you came up with the name for the president, which included, of course, brand names. And there's so many brand names in the film, and was wondering, was that all stuff product placement? Were you guys allowed to mock that? Were you concerned that you were going to get lawsuits?
I have no idea how they got away with it. I mean, I think it's one of those things where it's kind of smart for, you know, companies like that, you know, like Starbucks and Costco and things like that. I have no idea how they got away with that. I mean, it really surprised me. Just like, even when you're doing something positive, it's, you know, you get told by producers, like, well, we've got to check on that, or don't do that, or, you know, there's a book behind you in the background of a scene that has nothing to do with anything. It's like, well, we haven't cleared that yet. So, yeah, I don't know how they did that.
Yeah, it was always something that I was like, wow.
Yeah.
You know, when the film was about to come out, it got held back, and there was this whole thing with the studio. I think it played in like 2 places in order to meet some contract, and was just wondering, you know, what your reaction was when that happened.
I mean, I was reading the paper out here one day, and it was a Wednesday, and I came across a really small ad for it. No one's name on it, or it might have said a Mike Judge film, and it had one of those kind of Michelangelo drawings, kind of diagrams of a body. And that was the first I saw it. And then, yeah, they just dumped the movie onto 7 screens. And I never heard why. I mean, I heard something about, like, they didn't like the way it made fun of corporations. I never really believed that. I mean, I can't believe it even got that far. I mean, my thought was always it was just like some executive saying, like, look, we've already spent however much we spent on this. We're not going to put an additional 10 or 20 million into advertising. Let's get rid of this and cut our losses. And then, yeah, it became a cult hit. And, you know, that's like the same thing happened to Mike at the same studio with Office Space. They dumped Office Space, and then Office Space became like the second rental in the history of 20th Century Fox behind Star Wars. So, yeah, it's just, I don't know, maybe it's because Bottle Rocket came and went in 2 weeks and then became a kind of a cult movie that it's never really affected me. I mean, I'm just used to, you know, that happening to good movies, you know, that I've been in, and good movies that I've read about, you know, and even, you know, people's albums, you'll read about things that came out and didn't do well, or like, you know, Exile on Main Street getting released and getting panned, or being told it was too long, or things like that. So, I mean, I've never put much stock in that. But, yeah, it was definitely odd that it just got, you know, there was no press on it, nothing, no, you know, premiere. it was one of those things that always made me feel bad for Mike. But I think it's one of those things where he kind of feels vindicated now. But also, like me, because of Office Space, he might have like a little thicker skin, just kind of used to the BS that goes on behind the scenes.
Are you kind of surprised that it became the kind of cult hit that it is?
Yeah, for sure. And it was one of those things I would start to hear people saying lines back to me and not know what they were saying, saying, excuse me, and people saying, that was from Idiocracy. And then just, sure enough, over the years, heard it more and more. And then, different people coming up and, just fans and older people and, like 14-year-olds thinking it was hilarious, and then like odd people, like I had Jackson Brown come up to me at a concert one time and say he loved it, and to think about this really sensitive singer-songwriter liking a movie like that, I think it definitely kind of appealed to a wide range of people.
Your career over the last basically 20-odd years has been a range of different things, and was just wondering, what ones sort of stick out in your mind as, great experiences you've had making film?
There are definitely kind of touchstones in there that I think about, and, the short, Bottle Rocket, the feature, Bottle Rocket, and the Tenenbaums, and, had a lot of fun on Old School. That was the first, just to work with Will Ferrell, who was so funny, and Vince Vaughn being so quick. I'd never really been on a movie like that, just a full-blown kind of comedy with really kind of talented people, and Todd Phillips being, a really kind of driven, talented director. And the Wendell Baker story, the movie I wrote that we made, that was really fun, and learned a lot on that. And, I did I had a friend who was staying at the house, and he was doing props on 3:10 to Yuma, the Russell Crowe, Christian Bale movie, and I thought, gosh, that sounds great. And so called to see if there were any parts, and it had already been cast, and Jim Mangold was like, yeah, it's already been cast, but there's a small part of this railroad enforcer who tortures Russell Crowe, and so went and did that for 2 weeks, where it was, to be a bit player and watch really good people work was, incredibly fun and interesting. So I've always felt like I've learned on movies and met people, cast and crew, where I've thought, they're great, I would like to work with them again, if I'm ever able to get a project going myself, they'd be a good person to work with. And I've always, there's always something interesting on sets, and there are also, movies obviously that you kind of enjoy more than others.
Obviously you've done like I said, just a broad range of stuff. Do you feel that there are some in there, and if you want to name one or two that you feel are overlooked that people should go back and check out? Maybe they haven't.
I really don't think about them that much. I don't think about the ones people don't mention that much. I guess maybe the Wendell Baker story, just because I wrote it, and that's the only movie I've directed. I directed it with my brother Andrew. That seems like kind of a good. I've always liked that movie, and just kind of we were going for kind of just a 70s comedy kind of vibe, just kind of a movie that just kind of ambled along. Yeah, I like that one, but other than that, I really don't think about them that much. I know they're in there, but different people mention to me Henry Poole. They say they like that a lot, or people mention the HBO show Enlightened, which not a lot of people saw. They're.
What have you been working on recently, or you're excited that you're working on coming up?
Made this short film, Satellite Beach, that people have been responding to. I'd read an article in the LA Times about the moving of the space shuttle Enterprise from LAX to the California Science Center, and I read an article about the guy that was in charge of moving it. And I thought that it would be interesting to kind of do a little story based on that guy, only have my character be somebody who thought he was in charge of it, but really had nothing to do with it. And so we made this short film, and I've gotten it into a bunch of film festivals and won a couple of them, and that was really fun to do, just something completely on our own, with no notes and, no money, and just, a little crew of like me and, my brother Andrew and 5 or 6 friends. So that was really interesting. And then got this comedy that I wrote with a friend called Prison Love that Owen's going to be in and I'll be in, and just, within the next couple of days we'll have my co-star, have his deal signed, so I probably can't say who that is, but so that'll be really fun to do. And then I got this baseball action movie I wrote called Juarez 9 that's trying to get that made too. So like the idea, trying to work on my own stuff here and there, and then I always liked playing smaller parts in movies. I mean, I grew up kind of loving people like Warren Oates and Harry Dean Stanton, so I'd kind of like to do more of that stuff. And it's almost kind of just as hard to get those as it is kind of bigger parts, because people will think, oh, well, yeah, you won't want to play a smaller part, or they just won't think of you for it. But yeah, I really love parts like that, just because it's a great way to kind of be on a set and not have it all riding on you or be working in every scene, and I've always kind of enjoyed that.
Well, big fan of those guys too. I mean, yeah. Warren Oates and Harry Dean Stanton. I mean, whenever they show up, you always know it's going to be good.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, it's great to hear that you're working on a few projects with your brothers again. And were those the ones that you were referencing that you were trying to get together?
Yeah, those are. Yeah, I would direct this Prison Love movie with Andrew. Owen will act in it, and and then Andrew and I directed Satellite Beach together, and just figure, it's kind of a waste to not work together, especially, while we're young, as they say.
Does being in, movies that do relatively well, like Old School and stuff like that, does that open the door for you to be able to get people to give you the money to do the smaller things, or is it still a balance?
I mean, it's still incredibly hard. It's, harder for some people than it is for others. But yeah, I mean, I've definitely... It's very, very difficult to find money, and then with that, and then the business changing, and things are it's in a good way. The business is always changing, and but yeah, sometimes it's difficult to make stuff to get stuff made. That's why it was kind of fun to just do the short film and not have to kind of wait around for notes or money or cast or anything like that.
Great to catch up with you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Rob. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, no problem. Take care.
Okay, bye.
Welcome back. Thanks to Luke Wilson for coming on the show. You can find out more about him and his work, including a link to pick up your copy of Idiocracy over at our website, projection-booth.com. So there's a lot of stuff that's been written about Idiocracy over the years. We're not the only people to kind of pick up on this whole idea of some of it is coming true as we go along. But one article that really kind of caught my eye was this whole idea of you are a horrible person for liking Idiocracy. What is it? Idiocracy is a cruel movie, and you should be ashamed to like it.
By Matt Novak, who I tweeted at and tried to get him on the show because I would have loved to have him kind of talk with us about why we're horrible people for liking this movie, even though I can read it.
You can't read what?
No, I said even though I can read what he wrote, I still think it would have been good to have him on and sort of debate him on the points. And I think one of the big points is, as Jeff brings up, is the eugenics thing. Like, is the opening, and he found that really poor taste and really bad commentary.
Well, I wonder if this guy gets offended by the Darwin Awards. I mean, the Darwin Awards they give out every year to basically the dumbest people on Earth, really.
Who kill themselves.
Exactly. And to me, I absolutely love the Darwin Awards, but it's this whole idea of natural selection and the survival of the fittest, and in this case, the survival of the smart over people that do really stupid things and really shouldn't be allowed to live afterwards.
Again, I mean, I have to go back to this point: is you can't take that literally. This is not a scientific trustee. This is not anti-intellectualism in American life. This is a 2-minute setup for a farcical dystopian comedy. I mean, if you wanted to, if Mike Judge had wanted to do a more serious treatment of why he thinks people are getting dumber and talk about cultural influences and, poor decision making and all that, it would have put an audience to sleep. And so to sort of do the eugenics version of that, quick and dirty, was one, both very funny in his execution, but also made the point and allowed the story to begin.
The one thing that he writes in here, the guy who wrote this piece about how it's a cruel movie and you should be ashamed for liking it, he even goes one further and says, look, I'm not arguing that the world hasn't changed in some ways and that brief period of enlightenment that existed before you were born, nor am I arguing that the media we consume doesn't matter. It does, insofar as that it can influence how we see the world. But the great irony of a film like Idiocracy is that if we take the film to its logical conclusion, 99% of Americans should be sterilized, and if you spent 90 minutes watching this movie instead of studying quantum mechanics or something, that probably includes you.
Right, but I don't think anyone expects a comedy to be taken to its logical conclusion. I mean, that's a failure of logic here. I mean, it's, nor do I think it necessarily means, we talked a little bit about the ending where Frito had 30 kids and Joe had 3. And it's like, it's not so much that everyone has to be smarter, but it's sort of giving deference to smart people on topics of which they're subjects, which we seem increasingly have a difficult time doing as a society. And so the hopeful part of the end of the movie was like, well, they elected Joe president because they realized he was smarter. He could figure some of this stuff out. Yeah, to sort of take this sort of pedantic approach where, well, taken to its logical conclusion, well, I mean, take any comedy to its logical conclusion and, you get to an awful place because it's a comedy.
Well, it's pretty bad. I mean, to be president, intelligence really doesn't play into it that much. I mean, it plays in some, but so much of it is how well-spoken you are, how photogenic you are. I mean, we could have the smartest guy, but if he's ugly or if he can't speak very well in front of an audience, he's not going to be the president. So it's just like, I don't necessarily look at the office of the presidency as this is a really super smart person who I should just be impressed to hell with, or just even this is a great person that I should be impressed to hell with. I mean, there have been presidents, within my lifetime where I'm just like, I bet you I'm smarter than this guy. And I really don't like thinking that the person who's running the country is dumber than I am. Because I'm not a smart man, Jenny, but I'd make a good husband.
You know what love is.
Yeah, let's take Forrest Gump to its logical conclusion. This sort of mentally challenged, person stumbles through life like this. I mean, actually, what happened in Forrest Gump, if it were to happen in real life, is really kind of horrific. That this guy who's that doesn't have the cognitive abilities to comprehend going to war, falling in love, having children, but managed to do all these things and somehow do them well. I mean, to apply the sort of paleo future approach to that movie, that becomes awful too. But I don't think anyone thinks of Forrest Gump as an awful movie. It's kind of a heartwarming story.
I do. I think that I think it's I've talked about it many times how, to me, the Jenny character who is the agitator gets AIDS and dies and suffers, while Forrest, who's oblivious to everything, gets through life and everything's wonderful for him. So what is it telling us? Don't rock the boat. That's right. Don't rock the boat, kids. Go along with everything and it'll all be okay. No, it's like I said, if you want to push these things to its logical conclusion, yeah, I don't know. For some reason, that movie's always rubbed me the wrong way. I'm sorry.
Well, you've given it certainly more thought than I have. Forrest Gump, I mean, it's...
Yes. So, but beyond this, you're a terrible person. You're a terrible person for liking Idiocracy. There's been a lot written on how Idiocracy is becoming more and more a documentary as each year passes. And Rolling Stone has a piece on it. And then there's also a piece from this site called Uproxx that says that let's examine the many ways Mike Judge's Idiocracy is nearly upon us. The whole thing, the first one that he goes into is the eugenics piece at the beginning, saying that a new study indicates that we've lost 14 IQ points on average since the Victorian era. So they're saying, okay, there's that. The ow my balls. I guess there was actually a production company in Japan that was planning such a show that was along similar lines.
Yeah. To go back to the IQ thing, I mean, there are times where I'm reading books from the Victorian era and I'm just like, wow. I don't want to say that they're overwritten. I just want to say that they definitely used language in a much more eloquent way than we do today. And it's just sometimes it's like translating a different language completely. It's still English, but there are a lot more things going on than we currently have today.
And then it also points out the whole thing with de-evolution of language. We kind of talked about a little bit. Ads on everything and portion sizes run amok. The political process and posturing, and then, of course, the environmentalism aspect. So, and then, as we talked about before, that Brondo, you can now buy it. That's kind of a fun little joke kind of thing.
And I just imagine it tastes like Monster.
I have not checked it out.
Brondo the Thirst Mutilator. It's like a monster truck you can pour into your face. It's got electrolytes. What are electrolytes? I don't know, but they're extremely awesome, and Brondo is full of them. And they help plants grow, which is why you should drink Brondo and not water, because water is from the toilet, and I've never seen plants grow out of a toilet. It's got caffeine, super extra caffeine, and 5 kinds of sugar, which makes it delicious and much better than other energy drinks that are not delicious.
Nor have I, and it's unlike the other sort of movie products like Stay Puft Marshmallows, which, okay, are marshmallows with a connection to Ghostbusters. I mean, Brondo, just everything about Brondo in the movie makes you think this is the most awful thing. And everything we know about energy drinks, they're kind of gross to begin with. The idea that anyone would actually want to buy Brondo is kind of remarkable.
Yeah, I'd rather have Soylent Green than Brondo. Yeah, Brondo really reminds me of like Four Loko, and just that alcoholic energy drink where it's like addictive and just gross. I can imagine the smell of like Monster and Red Bull when I see them, drinking or showing Brondo on Idiocracy, and it just kind of turns my stomach.
It's kind of syrupy, sticky feeling in your mouth. Just never go away in the Idiocracy world because everything is Brondo.
Idiocracy, as we were saying, kind of owes a little bit of a debt back to other pieces of science fiction, whether it's the many movies featuring a black president when everything's in chaos, or things like that. Time travel film, Rip Van Winkle kind of idea of waking up, years in the future. And we got a message on our Facebook page from a listener who said that there was a short story from 1951 called The Marching Morons, and that to him a lot of Idiocracy sounds similar to this. And I guess, Mike, you had a chance to kind of look at this?
Yeah, I took a look at the story. It's a pretty short story, and it's out there pretty much public domain. It was published in a Galaxy magazine from the time, and reads pretty darn quickly. I almost wish that the author had taken it and made a full book out of it, because it seems like there's so many great ideas that they just don't necessarily explore as much as they possibly could. But it's kind of, I keep talking about how Joe in Idiocracy isn't that sympathetic of a character to me because he is a little dim. In this one, the guy who wakes up, John Barlow, rather than Joe Bauers, he is pretty much a dick. He wakes up and sees everything going on as a business opportunity for him. He quickly finds out that the problem is that the stupid people have pretty much taken over the world. They almost enslave the smart people. The smart people are there to do the repairs and basically make sure that the world doesn't fall into chaos. I mean, looking at the things in Idiocracy that are falling apart, going into entropy, these folks would be there to kind of fix them and do all this menial labor that the dumb people are too dumb to do. So this guy, John Barlow, who comes out of hibernation, he basically wants to take over the world, become world dictator, get all the money that they currently have, even though if he is world dictator, money won't matter. And he comes up with this great idea of selling. He uses basically modern advertising, modern as of the 1950s, advertising to intrigue people to want to go to Venus. And it's the same idea as there's too many dumb people on Earth, so they want to thin the herd, and they start sending people off to Venus and essentially pretty much know that they're crashing their ships into the moon. So they start planting all these ads, and the news people start talking about how great it is on Venus, and pretty much it starts to trickle through, and everybody starts thinking about how great it is to go to Venus, and they start sending these ships up, and the end of the story is basically that they send this John Barlow up as well, just because he is such a pain in the ass. And he comes in, not only is he a jerk to everybody that he meets, but he's even racist. By this time, the world has kind of evolved so much that, people from Africa or are married to people from Europe and all this kind of stuff. So one of the main characters' names sounds very African. And as soon as he finds out about that, he's like, yeah, I can't work with this guy. I have no problem. I've got plenty of black friends, but I can't work with this guy. And it's like, oh, so when they send him off in the spaceship, it's like, good for you.
See, I guess that's kind of why I like the Joe Bauers character, is because he seemed like such a genuinely decent human being in this weird future world where no one is decent by any standard that we would recognize today. And
True.
And as much as, he was smarter than everyone else, he was also just a much more decent human being than everyone else. He
really is just there to help. And I like that, one of his big speeches at the end is, I'm just here trying to help you people.
We mean you people.
What do you mean, you people?
But another thing that comes out of the Marching Morons is actually, I guess, a link to RoboCop.
I'm not sure if this is true or not. There's a television program that they're watching at one point, and the catchphrase from the television show is, would you like to buy it for $0.25, or would you buy it for $0.25? And basically it's the answer to this question that they ask on the show. So I'm not sure if that directly led to,
I'd buy that for $1.
but it definitely seems like that same kind of dystopian world that RoboCop is in can kind of be a shared universe with some of these other dystopian films and books and stories. So, I've seen other stories out there or other movies. Like there's one that's like A Day Without a Mexican, which was kind of based on like The World Without Jews or something, which was it's set in Vienna, and it was what if Jewish people weren't around and what would society be like. And that's a little bit more heady than A Day Without a Mexican, which is where all the white people suddenly have to start doing menial labor themselves and find out how shitty it is and how much Mexican people do for the people of California. So, it's definitely in that same kind of idea of taking things to that absurdist level, just to show us exactly what some of these problems are.
Well, the other thing that's interesting in looking at the notes on Marching Morons on Wikipedia was that they also linked it to Sleeper, the Woody Allen film. And I love Sleeper, but had not even thought of Sleeper in reference to Idiocracy, although it does make sense because there are similar things with Woody Allen waking up in the future, and Big Eyes is coming out soon, so you'll get the joke more nowadays, that the Keane paintings are considered, high art in the future.
And it was kind of the same thing with going back to the Marching Morons. He was put into this kind of comatose state from a dentistry accident. So kind of similar to Woody Allen. He went in for like minor surgery and he got into his coma that way.
But the other one that kind of, I hadn't even thought about it until I was rewatching Idiocracy for the first time in a couple of years, is how, of all things, WALL-E almost seems like a kid's version of Idiocracy to some extent.
I totally can see that.
So just to give you a breakdown on Wall-E, in the future, basically everything's covered in garbage. Wall-E is this little machine, little robot that goes out and cleans up. The mass consumerism is run amok. There's a company called By and Large, which is, I guess, a Costco or a Walmart, and there's no people around. And he discovers, the little robot basically discovers this seedling that's growing, and there's no trees, there's nothing. Like it's the same thing. There's no plants. The plants aren't growing anymore. And then what he finds out is that there's this ship, and on the ship is all these morbidly obese people who are kind of skating around on these these kind of coasters while they eat and watch TV, and they're totally disconnected from each other. There's no real communication between them. They're all just being consumers, like at the most highest level. And when I saw this movie, I thought, man, this is an amazing satire to come out of Disney, because it's almost making fun of itself. It's so sort of too smart for its own good. I was just amazed by it when I saw it. And in similar ways, you can see connections between Wall-E and Idiocracy. And Wall-E came out 2 years later, but with these Pixar films, they work on them for like a decade. So I don't seriously think that anyone saw Idiocracy and said, that sounds good, let's use that. It's one of those working in the zeitgeist, sort of what was around at that time. And I think we were all kind of maybe dealing with the anti-intellectualism of the Bush era, the second Bush era, where it seemed like people were willing to elect someone who didn't seem all that intelligent, and thinking too much about, should we really invade that country, was not considered a good thing in our media at the time.
Yeah, and I think both Wall-E and Idiocracy sort of share this idea of a purposeless life, that vacuum is filled by some sort of consumer force. The names of the characters in Idiocracy all being brand names, and the way that that mega company in Wall-E was sort of almost worshipped, or you were taught to revere it. It's a little bit. You could even connect it to Brave New World and Aldous Huxley, and the way the sort of the Model T and the Ford assembly line became a religion in that dystopia.
Well, I remember the break-ins with Fred Willard as the CEO of the company, and it almost looked like he was set up like doing a presentation like from the White House or something. It had like the way the logo on the podium and all that stuff. It almost seemed like maybe there was no government, but this big corporation that now runs everything.
That would never happen.
Brando.
Next thing you're going to tell me that like there's going to be a corporation that takes over a large chunk of downtown Detroit and sort of operates it as its own fiefdom. That would never happen.
No. Because it's
especially one that just happened to be really engaged in the junk loans and all that, and happened to not smell, like anything bad now.
See, now you're just talking crazy.
I know.
You just talk crazy. The other thing that I thought of, the other movie I thought of that came out earlier this year that reminded me of an echo to Idiocracy, but it's only in like one small part, was the Lego Movie. And much like Wall-E, for me, being a kid's film, I thought was very sort of audacious. There's a lot of stuff in the Lego Movie that I think, and I'm not going to get into it all here, but there's one joke that seems to echo back and forth between Idiocracy and the Lego Movie for me, and that is the "Ow my balls." There's a thing in there where one of the most popular TV shows in the Lego Movie universe is called
"Where Are My Pants?"
Honey, where are my pants?
So that's sort of like the kid version of it.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. You were talking about that whole idea of the people not being connected and everything, and of course that plays right into like internet culture and stuff. There was a story from 1909 that E.M. Forster wrote, the guy who wrote Passage to India, called The Machine Stops. And that is basically people never interacting with each other in person, only communicating through, what could best be described as email, basically, or video phone, because, video phones are also a future thing, like for the longest time, from the Jetsons and everything. But it is so like a precursor to the internet. And then I guess that kind of plays into that. There was that movie with Bruce Willis a few years ago called Surrogates, where it was people kind of using like real life robots, like real life avatars, going out into the world, and they can be the beautiful, perfect versions of the people who are basically stuck at home controlling these avatars throughout the day. And that was, I know that movie didn't get a whole lot of play or anything. The comic book that it was based on was actually better, but it's a fairly decent movie. It's kind of a really good double feature with, what was it called? Gamer? The one with Michael C. Hall. I always put Michael in there because of his character from 6 Feet Under. But yeah, those two make a good double feature.
So are there any other films or anything else we have left to say about Idiocracy, gents?
I'm good.
Yeah, me too.
We're going to take another break and play a preview for next week's show.
KidNet Television proudly presents America's favorite kid show host, Rainbow Randolph!
So you'll make sure my boy dances up front, right? Gets to sit in the chair?
You want your little booger eater on my show?
Meet Randolph Smiley. He once was rich. He once was famous. And he once was sane.
Rainbow Randolph is the man. Yes, oh yes, he is.
They kicked me out of the corporate penthouse. I'm homeless.
I can assure you, this network cannot survive another Rainbow Randolph.
Don't touch me! I'm in shock! Salmonella!
Sir, it is my personal mission to find a satisfactory replacement. Get me Smoochie.
You're telling me that KidNet is finally ready to pursue a show of Smoochie caliber.
Hey, it's Smoochie! Come on! Hello, New Jersey! Never despise you. I loathe you!
Now.
Waiter! My body was barely cold and you went to work for the Rhino. I gotta eat, don't I?
The only way to take back his career is to take down his replacement. In this jungle,
I'm going on safari. Safari!
Hunting season.
What's this?
Trust me, Sheldon. It's a handy accessory to have in this business.
Never ends.
Tear him apart! Now and forever! What's up?
Robin Williams, Edward Norton, Danny DeVito, Catherine Keener.
What does it all mean?
Death to Smoochie.
That's right, we're back, and we're talking about another satire next week, Death to Smoochie. We'll be joined by the writer Adam Resnick and actor Danny Woodburn, so don't miss that. Before we go, I want to thank this week's special guest, Luke Wilson, and also our special guest co-host, Jeff Wattrick. So, Jeff, what's the latest with you, sir?
Oh, not much. Just, trying to keep society from crumbling completely, so that my future great-great-great-grandchildren don't have to wake up in the world of President Camacho.
Yes, I hear that congratulations are in order and will be in order very soon as you add another one to the team over there. You and your lovely wife, both, I would say, journalists in the Detroit area in some form.
Yep. Thank you.
No problem. Always great to hear it.
All right. Thanks again, Jeff. We'll have links where people can find out more about Idiocracy and more about you over at our website, projection-booth.com. Thanks to everybody for listening. If you want to see what we have coming up, visit our Facebook page or download our free app for your smartphone or Kindle Fire. It's free. And remember, welcome to Costco. I love you.
You're late.
This information has been suppressed, and now it can be told. Every man, woman, and mutant on this planet shall know the truth about de-evolution.
Oh, Dad, we're
And the #1 movie in the country was called Ass. And that's all it was for 90 minutes. It won 8 Oscars that year, including Best Screenplay.
If you enjoy this show and want more people to know about it, head on over to iTunes, leave a comment, and rate it 5 stars. Make sure you like and share us on Facebook, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter. Just search for Christopher Media. Thank you in advance for supporting Christopher Media by clicking on the PayPal button and by clicking through to all the sponsors who support ChristopherMedia.net. Most importantly, we would like to take the time to extend an extra special thanks to you. Christopher Media could not exist without your support. Thank you for visiting ChristopherMedia.net, and thank you for listening. Christopher Media, let's make some noise.